Manufacturing has been described as an engine of growth and development of any country. This is clearly seen in Nigeria's manufacturing sector as the Purchasing Managers Index expands to 59.3 points in November. This indicates an expansion in the sector for 32nd consecutive months. The index grew faster compared to its level in October. 13 subsectors reported growth in the review month. They include transportation equipment, petroleum and coal products, furniture and related products, electrical equipment, plastic and rubber products, food, beverage, and tobacco products, and others. The paper products subsector recorded decline in the review period. According to the report from the CBN, the raw materials inventory drives growth of the manufacturing PMI. Well, let's talk more on this. I have an economic analyst, Dr. Emeka Okengwu. He joins me now live from our Abuja studios. It's great to have you join us, Doctor, this afternoon.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me. Good afternoon.
Yes, 1.1 basis points. That's looking at the positive and the side of the PMI from 59.2 index point to 59.3. What could be responsible for this?
Well, there could be two things. First to be your policy consistency, and then second could be that you're now restricting. I don't want to use the word border closure, that you have now restricted the movement of goods and services from your land borders. Those are the two things that are responsible.
Policy
basically.
Consistency. Let's dip down. Which of our policies at this time? Trading policy? Is it our, is it expanding the sector? A lot of interventions from the central bank to grow the manufacturing sector. Is that what is responsible for
Yes,
this?
the moment you are able to align your monetary policy to your fiscal policy, you begin to see this synergy that is building. Okay, from the fiscal policy levels, government is saying, let's keep the terms of trade. You must be able to now keep to the terms of the protocols that we're engaged in. And then from the aspect of the monetary policy, the CBN is saying, let's be consistent in those monetary policies that can be able to now ramp up what you call your local production and manufacturing. So I think that's what it is.
Well, Doc, a lot of fundamentals are being raised here because some of the figures are still not looking very good. For example, inflation is still on the high side. And many say you didn't want to use the word border closure, but that's what it seems to be. Many say with that being closed, the inflation might still be on the high side.
That's not true at all.
Okay.
What you're seeing is probably what you call a panic. You know, what happens usually when you now have policies. Okay, the moment you are able to sustain these policies, but also know that our manufacturing sector, which is actually the basis, you know, of what you might be able to call an industrial expansion or market expansion, is growing by leaps and bounds. Leaps and bounds not because they are growing in, you know, numbers of 10% and above, but the most important thing is there's an upward trajectory, and it is for us to be able to keep at it. But like I said, I didn't want to use the word, you know, border closure because you cannot completely shut out your neighbors. But what it simply shows is that Nigeria has the capacity, okay, if that sector was allowed to grow. And then the major traducer, the major militant or inhibitor, you know, to us growing our manufacturing industry is probably the allowance, not being able to pursue our local content policy, you know, which of course restriction of goods and services are part of it. So I think it's a good way to go. And I think with time, we find out that the more we now focus on production, the more we now focus on manufacturing, the more we now focus on now making certain that you have some sustainable raw material, you know, stream. The word I use is sustainable because for you to be able to keep the steady growth you now have in the manufacturing sector, of course, raw materials are very, very key, extremely key. We've now seen, you know, that we have the market. So what we now need to do, apart from the raw materials, is to now also now look at what you call the allied support systems. This is where you now have, you know, the infrastructure, vis-a-vis transportation, vis-a-vis storage, and of course, the almighty energy that you need to be able to keep the speed up.
Doc, let's look again at movement of goods via the border, and government is trying to say, let's use the ports and all of that. How accessible or how well would you say our ports are at the moment? The one that is really functional is Lagos Port, and we know what is happening there at the moment. So how well do you see us getting goods in? Yes, MPA is confirming that there's a lot of influx, that's rush coming their way. But how well do you see us sustaining this? You talked about sustainability.
Well, I mean, the land border closure is not infinite. Okay, the land borders are going to be ultimately opened, but there are some conditions that are attached to it. And of course, the seaports is all about, you know, what you call demand. When you have a lot of influx in the seaports now, I'm sure you're talking about the Lagos seaport, but the Port Harcourt seaport is also functional. Okay, to an extent, the Warri seaport is also not totally and completely redundant. So what we need to do is to be able to now create what you might be able to call incentives. Okay, and those incentives can be created if you make your transportation system more intermodal. And this is where you must begin to now look at your dry ports. This is where you must begin to look at your transportation, other transportation systems like your rail transportation, which is very key in the movement of goods and services inland. And of course, your roads, and then your articulated trucks. The moment you're able to get these things right, I think we're heading to the right direction. The most important thing is that government is focused on making certain that the right things are done now, which is great for us. But in also doing this, I keep saying we must not shut out our trading partners. That's also very critical. And this border closure actually gives us more business expansion opportunities if we get it right. Because if those conditions that we're asking our neighbors to meet are conditions we know, that they might not be able to meet, don't you think that it presents some kind of new investment frontiers for us to be able to go there and probably take over those services that some other person is now bringing at a very huge cost to our own domestic manufacturing systems?
One way or the other, I have to talk about the intervention of the Central Bank of Nigeria in all of this. We know they've come under knocks. Many have condemned some policies initiated by the Apex Bank. But one way or the other, some analysts are now coming to terms and saying that Central Bank seems to be on the right track. I don't know if you're also thinking on that line or what needs to be done by the Apex Bank.
I wouldn't know why anybody would want to. You see, for me, the central bank, yes, is, remember, the only person that does not make mistakes is God, okay? And these policies are also made by humans. And that is why there are people like us who might be able to now give our own, opinions or viewpoints or perspectives to whatever policies that the central bank. But remember that whatever it is they're bringing up is supposed to be leading, to ultimately helping us to reflate our economy. I don't know which policy that people would be very hard on, because I mean, like, with the moment you use the word interventionist, it simply means that these things are time-based. Okay, they are supposed to now help to either hedge, or give some support, for a period of time. So what the central bank is doing is what probably our development bank should have done. If we had a development bank, that was solid enough to be able to do this. Is also what probably our sovereign wealth investment authority should have done or should be doing if we also now have one that is well funded. So I think that the central bank is on the right track. But again, I'm not trying to say they're above mistakes. One or two of their policies, might have one or two places that they need to knock it here and there. If you give me one, if you ask me to give you one, I'll quickly say to you that the textile policy that is driven by cotton alone, should have been thought a little deeper to now include non-woven, okay, and petrochemicals, which is actually the mainstay of the new textile industry. But again, it's a good policy. So it's for us to be able to say, okay, fine, instead of now focusing basically on cotton, which might not, give you that volume that you need, okay, vis-a-vis meeting your local needs, and then the disposable capital that's available to your people. We could also now begin to look at petrochemicals, which is actually the mainstay, of the textile industry. So in all, I think it's all good, okay, and it's for us to be able to think these policies through and then encourage where we need to encourage and then critique, okay, with alternatives. Of course, it's not enough to critique. You must be able to say, okay, in doing this, I think you should have done it this way, and then we're all on the same page.
All right, Doc, let's round this up this way. We're moving on. It's the last week and the last work day for the month of November. By next week, we're in December, and that's a few weeks to the end of the year. The capital market seems to be doing fairly well now. People are moving to the capital market, getting equities at the moment. Now, what do you think should be the project? Let's project as we move into 2020. What are these policies we should stay put with? Where do we need to strengthen our laws, make it more conducive to do business? How do we get it right as we move on in 2020? What are your projections?
We must get research to be able to support innovation. And we must get innovation to be able to support business or industry. Now, what this means is that we must be able to now form what we call a three-tier relationship. The first tier relationship will be your research institutions. The second tier will be, of course, your funding institutions. The third tier will be your industry. And then the fourth tier will be your policies. The moment we're able to get this, but what is most critical is for us to be able to now develop that whole that makes certain that inputs are sustained. The moment we're able to sustain our raw material, usage or production, then we have an economy that will be growing. And of course, without also now excluding what I think is the most important, which is the skills. I think the moment we're able to now do more of skill-based education, develop more skill centers that will have formal schools, and then be able to now make certain that will now align our rail sector and the sub-nationals, we must be able to look at the policy of exclusive and concurrent, and then make certain that, business is part of what it is that will come out of whatever, alignments that we're doing at that level. I think if we do this, we will have a 2020 that all of us as Nigerians will be proud of.
Economic analyst there, Dr. Emeka Okengwu. Thank you very much for your time, joining us live from Abuja. Oh, let's take a break now, and when we return, of course, we have more for you. It's Business Nigeria. Don't go away.